Hey, it's your friend Alan Sanchez out here in Stockton, California. We're getting ready for a huge show. Of course, you know the man right next to me, Colt Cabana. Did you get lost because you're in Stockton? I know you're from the Chicago area. I know you're traveling the world right now, but you're here in Northern California.
I love how you said you know the man. Like, hey, everybody knows me. Household name. Maybe household for the ones that remembered when Punk waved to me. Hey, how you doing? Maybe that's how they would know.
Wrestling. Maybe I'll go back to Ring of Honor. Hey, Colt Cabana, how you doing?
Here I am, Stockton, California. I was in, right outside of San Francisco yesterday. Before that, I was doing a whole taping in Hollywood, Louisville, Kansas City. Next week, I'm heading to South America, Chile, then going to Mexico. So, like, yeah, you're thinking why you're here in Stockton, but, like, honestly, I'm everywhere.
Yeah.
So wherever there's a wrestling show with a wrestling ring, someone who's willing to let me perform on their show, I'll be there. No problem.
It's been huge. I remember I've been a huge wrestling fan my whole life. Now I'm supposedly a professional reporter now. But what is it for – because usually I talk to my friends, in your opinion, they always say, oh, yeah, I used to watch wrestling when I was a kid. And usually there's a bus from, in my opinion, about 14, 15 years old that you're supposed to get on when you're supposed to be an adult. And that bus left, and I forgot all about it. But I didn't care. But what is it, what do you think, in your opinion, why maybe when you get older, not necessarily that people don't watch, maybe they're not like, oh, yeah, I used to watch it, but they watch it really at home.
Well, I can tell you exactly what it's girls. Like, that's what it is. And I'll have this conversation with many people. There's all those, like, I remember my friend specifically, Jordan Glickson. Me and him were best friends. We collected all the wrestling. We'd go to all the wrestling shows every single Saturday morning. We'd be at each other's houses. And then, like, he discovered, like, rap and hip-hop music and women. And he just went that way. Yeah. And there's a handful of us who I think don't give in to, like, almost what society says that we should like or what we should do. I'm not saying, I still like women, don't get me wrong, right. But, like, you know, like, but in my mind it was, no, like, I love wrestling. I'm not going to do, you know, what everyone else says I should do, and because it's uncool or unpopular. Like, this is my love, this is my passion, I want to stay with it. So I continued watching. There really never was that bus that I jumped on, and I jumped on some other bus that said, hey, you can actually do this as a profession. And, you know, 13 years into professional wrestling, here I am doing this for a living, full-time, traveling the world. So I really think it's almost what society says and women, or men for some people.
There you go. Well, what does your family think? I mean, when you say, okay, you know what? I mean, I'm sure early on, they're like, okay, he's a kid, he's having fun. When they realize, okay, you're trying to do this for a profession.
Yeah, and I come from, like, a really nice part of the suburbs of Chicago, where everyone there was a doctor, a lawyer, a real estate agent, and to this day, my friends all have these nice, high-classy jobs, and I wasn't supposed to be a professional wrestler. Nobody from my town has ever been a professional, and, like, not like no one's ever made it big. That's not what they're saying. They're saying, like, no one's ever kind of went down into being a professional wrestler, but I have, and I've been really successful at it, and it's been great. And my parents said, you know, make sure you go to college, get an education, and I did. I got my bachelor's degree in business education, but while in college, I was traveling the roads as a professional wrestler, and I would split it, you know, basically 4 days in school, 3 days on the road, and I got my degree, and then they assumed I'd give it up and go get a real job, and I just never did. I continued with the wrestling, and now that I'm doing probably better than they've ever done, they're okay with it. So.
Well, no, that's the thing. I mean, you're doing it right. I'm not here to kiss your ass, but I kind of am. But anyway, you got ColtMerch.com. I know you got We Love Colt, which you have a great podcast, and I'll definitely link that on my blogs there if you want to listen to his podcast. Even if for someone who is a big wrestling fan, or it wants to learn about wrestling, I think it's a good thing to learn because you kind of not necessarily break it down, but you give the pure side of wrestling. You know what I mean? And you talk about the business not as it is being talked about today, but you just talk about it the way you see it, the way most people see it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't break anything down or play like Monday morning quarterback or anything. What I do is there's all these performers who have these wonderful stories in the world, you know, like. Everybody, I'm sure you have an amazing story of how you got this gig in yourself, you know, and I'm sure it didn't just like people think, oh, like you got it here, Alex, right. He's got that gig. No, I'm sure you worked your balls off or you did something, you know, there's an amazing story of how you worked your way up the ladder, and the same with wrestling, and in terms of, and I think wrestling is such a weird dichotomy in America, not only the world, And so what I do is I've made these friends over the last 13 years traveling the world. I've made these friends, and I know their stories, and I think they're wonderful. And I don't think when, maybe a wrestling journalism sits down with these guys, nobody really feels comfortable enough to open up to them and to talk about their lives because they're not going to talk to them ever again. But I have these real built-in relationships that I have with my friends. And so we sit down on my podcast and we talk and we kind of, it's just me and them talking. But next thing you know, they're talking about how they were homeless at 13 or how they just moved to Mexico on a dime just to try to make it in this crazy world. And there's so many different stories. And that's kind of what's being painted in my podcast. And I think it's almost made, like you said, I have coltmerch.com and I have my podcast. I'm really doing an underground movement. I'm my own boss. Right. I wrestled for WWE for 2 years. I was under corporate America. I had the checks coming in, and I love it so much that I can get away from that. I don't need them to succeed, and I really believe I'm an American. Yeah, I'm an American tale. Like I'm my own American story. I'm making my own wonderful American story by wrestling in these small little shows all over the world. But you add up all those small shows and all the podcasts and the merchandise and the nice little following and the YouTube shows, and you build it all up, and all of a sudden you have this repertoire, you have this portfolio, and now all of a sudden you got a following and you're making a nice little living. So I'm really doing the American dream right now, and it's working really well.
I look. I remember you from Heat when you're on Heat a lot and stuff like that on WWE's. And then, of course, the big thing, and I got to ask because I was sitting there and I was just like blown away on what happened when CM Punk sat there on the ground at Raw. And then he said your name. I mean, we knew you before. I knew you guys were friends, but some didn't know. So some didn't like, who is he? Is he making up names? I know you went over in your podcast, but did you see that coming? Did you see the wave? Like, I know he told you that, hey, you should watch it. It's going to be a little extra special. But did you think it was going to go to that distance where he went with it?
Yeah, Punk and I hang out every day. Like, literally, we're best friends. We live 2 blocks from each other. He used to live in my house, so like, that's our relationship. And we've been doing this forever. And even when he said it, I was like, that's cool. But like you said, to me, that was fine. Like, oh, cool, right on. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. But then all of a sudden, the amount of people that were Googling me and YouTubing me that had no clue what I had to offer, who I was, or like you said, why I even said this guy's name. And now all of a sudden you see the line of work that I have. That's what's the most important to me, and what I'm grateful and thankful to Punk for, is that he's opened this idea that, hey, there's other people out there, and not only that, they're talented and they're great and they have this great line of work. So the amount of people that came and that have written to me and emailed me and tweeted me that I had no clue who you were, and wow, you're an amazing performer or talent or whatever you are. That's kind of what has been the best, not so much a surprise, but the best spark to really, and it was a great present that he gave to me.
Aren't you glad you didn't stink it up in all your YouTube videos? Because what happens if they looked you up and you were pretty crappy or something?
And that's the thing is, like, when people get, like, these big, like, a snap of something special, if they have nothing to back it up, or if they don't have a weekly podcast to continue to have these followers, then the people will slowly dwindle away. Or if they'll see us do a bad match, they'll change the channel or they'll go support somebody else. But I'm grateful that, that's what I've been working for the past 13 years now, is to build up this this reputation that I've made for myself. And you never know when that one thing's going to come, and it kind of came during one of the greatest wrestling promos of all time.
Oh, I mean, I remember ESPN was talking about it. I mean, I don't remember ESPN doing anything unless it was some big WrestleMania match with some Hollywood or sports star like Mike Tyson and stuff like that. So it was really a big thing, and you were put into it, and then so people started listening to you. Did you kind of feel that pressure? You're like, okay, now I'm not just the guy, the wrestlers, true wrestling fan. No, I'm in the forefront. Maybe some of these kids.
Well, that's funny you say that. I sometimes consider myself the wrestler's wrestler, and taken from the comic or whatnot. And like, obviously, maybe 8 million people don't know who I am, but the true diehard fans, they know who I am. So I didn't feel any pressure. Again, I really don't feel pressure that much these days. I went and I had a dark match with WWE, and it was just like, it's another day of work. If they like me, they do. If they don't, they don't. Whatever. And obviously, I'm not there, so obviously they didn't like me. But that's not consuming my life right now, because I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing and doing my path. And so I don't really feel pressure. I just know I'm doing the correct thing by the way that I've gradually gained this audience, and even before he shouted me out, I had this great audience, amount of Twitter followers and podcast listeners, and now it's only doubled, tripled, quadrupled since he shouted me out. But I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing, and I don't really feel any pressure with it.
The pressure, I would think, and I kind of want your opinion on it, is that no matter what, the WWE has to be the forefront of what people see what wrestling is, whether you're a true wrestling fan or you just watch it while you got a couple minutes on a Monday night or a Friday night. And you touched on about it after you talked about when CM Punk said all those things he did. And let's be honest, and I'm a huge fan, and I hope maybe one day to be a part of something with the WWE. But for a while, it's not been a big waves like it used to be, or there seems to be something that needs to change. Do you see something like that, or is it just me, or is it just some of the bloggers who just want to mouth off about?
I've definitely come to the realization. I think this for anybody, and I've had this conversation with my friends on the road, is that wrestling will only be as cool as when you were a child, because that's when you fell in love with it. So for you, I don't know. There's people right now who in 30 years will only be like, Chris Masters is the greatest wrestler ever, and no one will ever be better than Chris Masters. Like, that's going to be there because they grew up on him doing the master. You know what I'm saying? So obviously that nostalgia, I think, holds in. For me, Junkyard Dog, Billy Jack Haynes, Hercules Hernandez. And if you go back, Hercules Hernandez was awful, but in my mind, he was amazing. But at the end of the day, WWE will always be the biggest dog. Even if they're the biggest stinker in town, they'll always be the biggest moneymaker. They're a machine. They're Disney. They're the Disney of wrestling. That's fine. And whether they're up or down, they're always going to be the biggest dog, and people are always going to associate professional wrestling with WWE. And in my case, that's fine. If I make it there again, I'll wrestle there again. If I do have the perception of I want to change the way people look at wrestling, and I'm probably not going to do it on a giant global market. I'm only going to do it on an underground niche situation, which is fine, and I'm happy about it. I love the idea of an underground do-it-yourself, the bands, comedians, artists, musician, you name it. Like, I really have a lot of respect. Insane Clown Posse is a huge influence on my career, and they've built their career on being their own label and being underground artists for 20 plus years now. And I almost want to be the Insane Clown Posse of professional wrestling, sans the makeup.
Well, that's the thing. Well, because to say you're the underground, but you're like one of the top names of the underground. I'm sure like the guys here in Stockton or any other smaller promotion are asking you and would love to be in your.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I'm unsigned. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I have no giant publication pushing me. I have no giant corporation giving me money. I have no giant sponsorships. It's me. I'm my own ship. And yes, I am maybe a big name for underground, but it's all me in my studio apartment shipping out DVDs and shipping out T-shirts and making my own advertising deals with these guys. And a lot of people always will email and think and assume that I have all these assistants and people working for me. It's just me.
So you're signing your own autographs and you're sending it out?
Listen, I'm at the post office 4 or 5 times a week. They all say, "Hey, Colt, how you doing?" They know me. I mean, that's what I say. It's the American dream. That's part of the business. It's just me. And I don't want to divide any, how much ever little or more money there is in wrestling. I never want to split it or I've worked so hard to get to this point. Like, I'd like to reap the benefits and the rewards of everything.
Last question. If some, young kid is looking at this and, he's watched wrestling, he's doing it, maybe in his backyard or in his living room like a lot of us did, what should they maybe something that you learned, like, man, I wish I would have known that before I did it. Not that it would stray you from it, but just would have been less bumps. There's going to be bumps no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, but my path is a great path, I think a lot of people think they'll just go to the WWE, and I'd say, make sure you do smaller shows, you learn your trade, you train as much as you can, you learn from everybody. Here's something I would have done if I had to do it all over again, is I would have learned different languages. I would have become bilingual, trilingual, quadlingual. I don't know if that's, because there's wrestling all over, and an American going over to Mexico, if I only knew Spanish, I could probably be a giant star. But because I don't, and I'm too lazy to go learn it, I have to stick to America or England, or Australia, the ones that speak English. So I don't know if that's exactly what you're looking for, but
It's a good thing, because it's true. Because people think, it's only one business. When the purists, you see, there's so many here in the United States, and then Canada and Mexico, and I grew up first watching the Mexico, Lucha Libres and stuff like that, Santos and Místico, which is Sin Cara and stuff like that, and watching the different ones. But that's, I think, is a great tip for all.
And I think that's also more than wrestling. Right. In any business, I can only assume, in any culture, it's just if I was to do it again, if I was younger, I would have just known. I would have to have known the importance of learning other people's languages, because it's more than wrestling. It's every business. It's everything. Everything. It just gives you a one-up on. It just gives you an advantage. If you're looking for any kind of advantage, that's a great advantage to have.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I mean, I've been watching you for a long time, and you before we, a few months ago, you couldn't really say your name to some people because they might not know. Now your name's always going to be out there. Check out his podcast if you have not heard it. I give just at least, if you spend 10 minutes, then you're going to want to listen to the rest of it, because it's great. It's you really get to learn things that the person who's been watching wrestling my whole entire life, haven't learned, and you educate me. You educate me. Thank you so much.
It's The Art of Wrestling. You can look it up on iTunes. It's free every Thursday on iTunes or WeLoveColt.com.
Just sing it. Everybody in a ring, just sing it. Say,